Alan Whitehead is a great politician and a great leader, but he always has been. I first saw Alan when he was in Southampton University Students' Union Debating Chamber in 1972. He had already been union president. Long hair halfway down his back, beard, RAF trench coat, and in debate he swayed hundreds of students to accept his argument.
Aren't you worried that what you're doing is really illegal?
Well, it's in a very dubious area of legality. If you're careful, you can't get done for it.
I remember Alan's first few weeks of leader. He had a civic reception for the South Wales miners in the Civic Centre, crates of beer, new Labour councillors mixing with miners from South Wales and egging them on to take on the Thatcher government. But the first council meeting that Alan was leader was also so memorable. Started at 2 PM on a Wednesday, and the Tories had put down a dozen motions. And we went through the lot and finished the meeting at 5:30 in the morning on the Thursday. I can remember we were debating car parking charges in the city at 3 AM in the morning. And the Tories never did that again. From the beginning, Alan understood local government finance. He stopped the Tory council's accelerated debt repayments and used the money for growth in the city. He got around the Thatcher capital controls by selling land for Toys R Us, building a multi-storey car park. Alan purchased the Gaumont Cinema from the chief operating officer of rank so it couldn't become a bingo hall. The Mayflower as we know it today is appreciated by us all, with West End musicals, opera, ballet, and the much-loved Christmas pantomime. And this demonstrates the risks that Alan was prepared to take when he overruled the city treasurer to make the purchase. Alan Whitehead turned Southampton around. And how do we know? Because a branch of the Bank of England that was in the city said so at the time. Alan ensured that the Marlins development was built. He kept John Lewis in the city with a Hammerson's deal to build West Quay that we all know and use today. He kept the BBC in the city that were threatening to go to Brighton. But today on Havelock Road, we still have a regional BBC television and Radio Solent. He provided the land for National Express, for the coach station down in West Quay. And as the Southampton Echo headlined at the time, Southampton was a £1 billion boom city. Investment at today's prices nearing £3 billion.
Council leader Alan Whitehead believes that good publicity for the economic regeneration Labour's encouraging here is good politics. And anyway, that modern socialism needs to be about something more than solemn debate.
I think the main political point is that socialism is about having a good time, having fun, interesting things, as well as the very important but perhaps less amusing basic necessities. And we're trying to do both of those things in Southampton.
Alan was a trail-blazing local politician, always at the cutting edge, particularly on the environment. He created and funded the first Environment Committee of the City Council. And as the Echo said at the time, the city shows the way. One of his lasting achievements started in 1986, when Alan proposed the City Council becomes a self-sustaining city for energy regeneration. A cooperation agreement was agreed by Southampton City Council and Department of Energy in Whitehall to develop a geothermal heat network, which today provides geothermal energy to the Civic Centre, 5 hotels, Royal Southampton Hospital, office complex, Solent University, the swimming pool, 53 acres of West Quay Shopping Centre, and public and private housing. This project was ahead of its time and unequalled anywhere.
If there's one thing I would say about Alan, it is this, which is it took a long time to get the left to truly understand why the climate crisis was a central part of our aims and objectives, and it was an agenda for social justice. And Alan is one of the heroic figures who made that happen through his work inside Parliament and also his work outside Parliament. His work in Syria in particular has been incredible. So much is owed to Alan for the agenda that is now central to this Labour government.
So much of Alan's parliamentary career has focused on energy and climate, and he himself once said that people would avoid you in the corridors if you were interested in fringe issues like climate change, which feels completely crazy now and is proof that actually he was ahead of the curve, quietly and unassumingly leading the way. I think so many things have changed over the 27 years that he was an MP, including the political understanding of climate and energy and how integral it is to both people's everyday lives, but also our politics. I had the pleasure of working with him for 3 of the last 4 years that he was in Parliament. And while we were obviously completely convinced of the argument, I think it's safe to say we were both pretty shocked last year when not only Ed Miliband, but also Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves all mentioned the rather niche topic of reform of the energy grid at Labour Party conference. But I think it shows how much things have changed and how Alan has been completely central to that shift in Parliament. Alan spent the best part of 3 decades sitting on endless bill committees, scrutinising secondary legislation to the point that civil servants knew they had to come with answers to every possible question that could be asked. And he's been building Labour Party policy for particularly over the last 10 years, but really for almost 3 decades. And he stood up week after week in both the Chamber and Westminster Hall to put that vision forward, as well as hold the government to account, which is no easy feat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The truth of this issue is that the government is thrashing around over what we know is now a decade of failure on energy, and particularly the transition to a low-carbon energy economy. The government has no answer.
While Alan was obviously best known within Westminster for his encyclopedic knowledge of the energy system, I think it's safe to say that he was also a tireless constituency champion, and he was so proud of Southampton. For decades, his twice-weekly constituency surgeries offered obviously advice and support to individuals, communities and faith groups, but actually it led to his involvement in lots of those campaigns and celebrations and projects that gave him a reason to talk about the city and why he was so proud to represent such a great city. Obviously from the less good, like NHS waiting times, to the more positive, like bidding for the City of Culture, and obviously being an ardent supporter of Southampton Football Club, no matter what their fortunes, it was clear who he was in Parliament to represent.
I have so much to thank Alan for, or Uncle Alan as I know him. His incredible work when I was last Energy Secretary, helping us get the Climate Change Act into place. Then his years in opposition, really thinking through what the new agenda was. Then his 4 years working as Shadow Energy Minister with me, where he was the font of incredible knowledge, wisdom, so generous with his time. And I often say this about Alan, but he's forgotten more about the energy system than most of us know. He's just an incredible person, an incredible hero, and so much of what we are now doing in government is thanks to Alan. Did you know that Alan Whitehead was not just a contestant on Cracker Jack in the 1960s, but a triumphant contestant on Double or Drop?
Now, gentlemen here, Alan, you're the incoming champion anyway, aren't you? You've got to get your pen and pencil later. When did the First World War begin?
1914.
August 1914, 1 point. Who was Prime Minister then?
Lloyd George.
No, Mr. Asquith. When did the war end?
1918.
1918, another point. All right, John. And the present champion, Alan Whitehead. A nice big hand for them all, yes?
Did you know that when Led Zeppelin played the University of Southampton, who got a shout out? Alan Whitehead.
I would say Alan is famous across the House of Commons for many different things, but one of the things that stood out to me was a conversation I had with the note takers at Hansard, who take note of everything that's said in the House of Commons chamber. And apparently Alan is notorious in their team that they all breathe a sigh of relief when they see that it's him at the dispatch box in a debate, because he's so methodical and thorough in what he says, and it's so obvious that he knows so much more than other people when he talks about an issue that it's such a pleasure to watch. There were so many things that I loved about working with Alan, not least that he had time for everybody. He was always happy to guide newer MPs and those less familiar with energy policy through complex parliamentary procedures, and was always generous with his knowledge, meeting endless people from across industry and policy worlds who were so keen to pick his brains for his knowledge and expertise in the area, as well as understand his approach to making change happen. All of this he did with a smile on his face and with a story about his past or a story about his exploits with his family over the weekend. And because while he is obviously so intelligent and has so much to offer in terms of politics, the thing that made him such a delight to work with was the fact that he was proud to just be a normal person that wanted to make change in the world. That's also how I know he'll hate me saying any of this, but I also think that he should just be incredibly proud of his career in Parliament, and I hope that he recognises the importance of the role that he's played over the last 3 decades.
I was on the City Council with Alan Whitehead for all of the 1980s, and it's a real pleasure to pay tribute to all he has done for Southampton. So let's give Alan, and let's not forget Sophie, his strength by his side for decades, a big thank you for over 40 years of public service. You both deserve a long and happy retirement, knowing that we are proud of what you have achieved for all of us.